The massive conference hall stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal floor. Captain Jiwoo Park stood at the center podium, his Earth Defense Force uniform crisp and clean against the alien architecture that surrounded him. Above his head, holographic displays showed the spinning symbols of 47 different star systems, each representing a member of the Galactic Council. Jiwoo had trained for this moment his entire career, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of standing before representatives of species that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. The air itself seemed to hum with ancient power and technology that humanity could barely comprehend. To his right sat the Vorthok delegation. Their reptilian forms were covered in gleaming metal armor that seemed to grow directly from their scales. Admiral Thyros, their leader, watched Jiwoo with eyes that glowed like burning coals. The Vorthak had conquered 17 star systems in the last century alone, and their military might was legendary throughout the galaxy. On his left, the Chitauri representatives clicked and buzzed in their strange insect language. Their compound eyes reflected the light in patterns that made Jiwoo slightly dizzy to look at directly. These beings had perfected warfare through swarm tactics, overwhelming their enemies with numbers and coordination that no individual species could match. Behind them, the Lumina floated in their energy containment suits. Pure beings of light and electricity, they communicated through color changes that painted the walls in shifting rainbows. They had fought wars by simply draining the power from enemy ships, leaving them dead in space. And here was humanity, represented by one man with a collection of weapons that suddenly seemed very primitive indeed. The council speaker, an ancient being whose species Jiwoo could not even identify, gestured with what might have been an arm. The universal translator in his ear crackled to life. The species known as humans requests membership in our council. They claim to possess military capabilities worthy of our consideration. Captain Park, you may demonstrate your weapons technology. Jiwoo nodded and activated his holographic display. Images of human weapons appeared in the air around him, rotating slowly so all the delegates could examine them from every angle. This is our standard infantry plasma rifle, he began, his voice steady despite the weight of 47 civilizations watching his every word. It fires concentrated energy bursts at 1,200 rounds per minute with an effective range of 2 kilometers in atmosphere. The display showed human soldiers in training exercises, their weapons cutting through metal targets with precise, controlled bursts. Murmurs arose from several delegations, though whether they were impressed or dismissive, Jiwoo could not tell. Admiral Thyros leaned forward, his massive form casting shadows across the crystal floor. What is the weapon's power output per shot? 15 terawatts peak, 8 terawatts sustained, Jiwoo replied. Several delegates exchanged what might have been glances. The Chitauri buzzed more loudly among themselves. Jiwoo continued with growing confidence. Our kinetic weapons use magnetic acceleration to fire projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. The hologram shifted to show human railguns, their sleek barrels crackling with electromagnetic energy. These can penetrate most known armor materials and deliver devastating kinetic impact. Rate of fire? This question came from one of the Lumina, their suit flashing curious yellow patterns. Varies by design. Our ship-mounted versions can fire continuously, limited only by power generation and heat dissipation. The display showed human warships in formation, their weapon systems glowing as they fired in perfect synchronization. The coordinated volleys struck asteroid targets, reducing them to glowing fragments in seconds. Dr. Yuna Lee, the xenobiologist, who had accompanied him, stepped forward to join the presentation. Her role was to demonstrate humanity's understanding of alien physiology and how their weapons could be adapted accordingly. We have also developed adaptive ammunition systems, she explained, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. Our weapons can be configured to exploit specific biological or technological weaknesses in target species. This caused a stir among the delegates. The concept of weapons designed specifically to counter different alien physiologies was apparently not common in galactic warfare. Lieutenant Min-Soo Kim activated additional displays showing human tactical formations. Soldiers moved across virtual battlefields with fluid precision. Their weapons fire coordinated in complex patterns that created overlapping fields of destruction. Human military doctrine emphasizes adaptability and rapid response, Kim explained. Our forces are trained to operate effectively in diverse environments and against unknown enemy capabilities. The tactical displays showed human units fighting in space, on planetary surfaces, in underwater environments, and even in the crushing depths of gas giant atmospheres. Each scenario demonstrated different weapons and techniques adapted to specific conditions. Admiral Thyros studied the displays with obvious interest. His species had built their empire through superior firepower and traditional military tactics. The human emphasis on adaptation was something he had not encountered before. The council speaker raised his appendage again, and the hall fell silent. "Your weapons show competence," the ancient being stated. "Your tactical coordination is adequate. However, your technology appears to be several centuries behind our current capabilities." Ji-Woo felt his heart sink, but he maintained his composure. This was the moment they had all feared. "We acknowledge that our technology may seem primitive compared to your achievements," he replied carefully. "However, we believe that our commitment to innovation and our willingness to learn could contribute to the Council's strength." Several delegates made sounds that the translator could not interpret. Admiral Thyros tilted his massive head, considering the human captain with those burning eyes. "Perhaps," the Vorthak leader rumbled, "your species shows promise, despite your limitations. The Council will grant you provisional membership with mining rights to the Kepler 442b system. You will establish a colony there and demonstrate your ability to maintain galactic standards." The other delegates indicated their agreement through various gestures and sounds. The Chithari's buzzing took on a different tone, while the Lumina flashed patterns of what might have been approval. Ji-Woo bowed formally to the assembly. "Humanity accepts this honor and responsibility. We will prove worthy of your trust." As the session concluded and the various delegations began to disperse, Admiral Thyros approached the human group. Up close, his armored form was even more intimidating, towering over them like a living siege engine. "Captain Park," he said, his voice carrying undertones that made the translator struggle. "Your weapons are indeed primitive, but I observed something in your tactical demonstrations that interests me." "What is that, Admiral?" "Your soldiers fight with a coordination I have rarely seen. They move as if they trust each other completely, even in the face of certain death." The alien's eyes glowed brighter. "This is not common among civilized species." Ji-Woo met the alien's gaze steadily. "Humans have learned to work together through necessity, Admiral. We have faced many challenges on our home world that required cooperation to survive." "Indeed." Thyros turned to go, then paused. "I recommend you establish your colony quickly, Captain. The galaxy can be a dangerous place for unprepared species." As the Vorthak delegation departed, Dr. Lee moved close to Ji-Woo's side. "That almost sounded like a warning," she whispered. "Or a threat," Lieutenant Kim added grimly. Ji-Woo watched the alien delegates leaving the Great Hall, each group returning to ships that could reduce Earth to ash without effort. Humanity had gained membership in the Galactic Council, but he could not shake the feeling that they had also gained something far more dangerous: enemies. Captain Do-Hyun Choi stared at the smoking ruins of New Seoul Colony through the viewport of his investigation ship. 6 months ago, this had been a thriving human settlement on Kepler 442b, home to 370 colonists who had volunteered to represent humanity among the stars. Now, it was nothing but twisted metal and scorched earth. The rescue beacon had gone silent 3 days ago. When the emergency response team arrived, they found no survivors and no explanations. The colony's defensive systems had been completely destroyed, but not by any weapon signatures in the human database. "Sir, you need to see this," Lieutenant Borum said from the scanning station. Her voice carried a tension that made everyone on the bridge turn to look at her. "I'm detecting Vorthak, energy signatures throughout the destruction pattern." Do-hyun felt his stomach clench. The Vorthak were supposed to be allies now, fellow members of the Galactic Council. Their military exercises in this sector had been approved by the Council itself. "Are you certain, Lieutenant?" "Yes, sir." The blast. "Patterns match Vorthak plasma cannons exactly. Multiple ships, probably a full battle squadron." Borum's fingers danced across her controls, bringing up holographic displays of the damage. "Sir, this wasn't random destruction. Someone systematically targeted every building, every defensive position, every escape route. The investigation. Team prepared to descend to the planet's surface." Dr. Yuna Lee, now promoted to head of xenobiology after the successful council presentation, joined the landing party. Her expertise in alien behavior patterns might help explain what had happened here. The shuttle descended through Kepler 442b's thin atmosphere, passing over what had once been carefully planned streets and gardens. The colonists had worked for months to make this place feel like home, planting earth flowers and building structures that reminded them of their homeland. All of it was gone. They landed near what had been the colony's main administration building. The structure was intact but empty, its walls scorched by energy weapons. Inside, computer terminals flickered with damaged data streams, their screens showing fragments of the colony's final hours. "Captain, over here," called Sergeant Tae-hoon. Nam, the team's security specialist. He was kneeling beside what looked like a blast crater, but something about his posture suggested he had found more than just damage. Do-hyun approached and saw what had caught the sergeant's attention. Bodies. 37 colonists, men, women, and children, arranged in a line facing away from the administration building. Each had been killed by a single plasma blast to the back of the head. "This was an execution," Dr. Lee said quietly, her scientific training warring with her human horror at the scene. "They were lined up and murdered systematically." Tae-hoon was examining the ground around the bodies with a portable scanner. "Sir, I'm reading Vorthak boot prints all around this area. Heavy armor, at least 12 individuals. They stood right here and watched while this happened. The investigation team spread out across the colony, documenting everything they found. The pattern became clear quickly. The Vorthak had not simply destroyed the colony during a training exercise. They had landed, rounded up the survivors, and executed them with cold efficiency. But why? The answer came from the colony's geological surveys, stored in a damaged but recoverable data core that Corporal Yoon-hae Yu managed to extract from the ruins of the science laboratory. "Captain, look at this," she said, projecting holographic charts into the air above her portable workstation. The colonists discovered a massive deposit of trilithium crystals 3 days before the attack. Do-hyun studied the survey data. Trilithium was one of the most valuable substances in the galaxy, used in faster-than-light drive systems and advanced energy weapons. A deposit this size would be worth more than most star systems' entire economic output. According to the mining agreement we signed with the Council, any major discoveries had to be reported and shared according to standard protocols, Dr. Lee added, reviewing the legal documents on her tablet. The colonists sent their report to both Earth and the Galactic Council the same day they made the discovery. "And 3 days later, they were all dead," Tae-hoon said grimly. The team continued their investigation, but the evidence painted a clear picture. The Vorthak had received the trilithium report and decided that humanity did not deserve such a valuable find. A quick military exercise in the area would provide perfect cover for eliminating the witnesses and claiming the discovery for themselves. When they returned to their ship, Do-hyun immediately sent an encrypted message to Earth Command. The evidence, was overwhelming, documented with scientific precision that even the Galactic Council could not dismiss. 37 human beings had been murdered for the crime of finding something valuable on their own legally granted territory. The response from Earth came within hours, transmitted through the quantum communication array that connected all human colonies to their home world. Captain Jiwoo Park himself appeared on the main view screen, his expression grim. "Captain Choi, your report has been received and verified by Earth Command. We are preparing a formal protest to the Galactic Council, demanding justice for the Kepler 442b colonists and full reparations for their families. Sir, with respect, the Council has already shown they consider human lives expendable. What makes you think they'll care about our protests?" Park was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried an edge that Do-hyun had never heard before. "Colonel Hyejin Kang has requested a private meeting with Earth's military leadership. It seems she has been preparing for exactly this situation." The transmission ended, leaving Do-hyun and his team alone with the ruins of humanity's first colonial attempt. As they prepared to leave Kepler 442b, taking detailed records of the massacre with them, none of them could shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. Dr. Lee stood at the viewport, watching the planet fall away beneath them. "They made a mistake," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" "The Vorthak. They think this was just about eliminating witnesses to claim a mining operation." She turned to face Do-hyun, and her eyes held a coldness he had never seen in the gentle scientist. "But they just taught humanity exactly what kind of galaxy we're living in." "And what kind is that?" "The kind where only the strong survive, and where mercy is considered weakness." Lee turned back to the viewport. "They wanted to see what humans do when they're cornered and outgunned. I think they're about to find out." As their ship jumped to light speed, carrying the evidence of the Kepler 442b massacre back to Earth, none of them knew that Colonel Kang was already activating protocols that had been years in the making. Deep in classified military facilities, soldiers were training with weapons and tactics that no alien species had ever encountered. The Vorthak had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about galactic power. Instead, they had given Earth's military exactly the justification it needed for Operation Honey Badger. In the cold depths of space, New Sol Colony continued to burn, its smoke carrying a message that would soon reach every corner of the galaxy. Humanity was no longer interested in playing by the Council's rules. Ambassador Sumin Yoon walked through the corridors of the Galactic Council Station with measured steps, her diplomatic training keeping her expression neutral despite the rage burning in her chest. In her briefcase, she carried documented evidence of the Kepler 442b massacre, complete with forensic analysis, energy weapon signatures, and testimony from the investigation team. The council chamber looked exactly the same as it had 6 months ago when humanity had first been granted membership. The same crystal floors, the same holographic displays of member systems, the same sense of ancient power that made humans feel small and insignificant. But something had changed in Sumin's perspective during those months. She no longer saw majesty in the alien architecture. She saw arrogance. Admiral Thyros lounged in his delegation's seating area, his massive reptilian form draped in ceremonial armor that caught the light in intimidating patterns. When his burning eyes met hers, Sumin saw no guilt, no shame, only the cold calculation of a predator who had successfully eliminated competition for resources. The council speaker called the session to order with the same gesture that had welcomed humanity into galactic civilization. Now it felt like a mockery. Ambassador Yoon represents the human government in a formal complaint regarding the Kepler 442b incident, the ancient being announced. She may present her evidence. Sumin activated. Her holographic display and images of the destroyed colony filled the chamber. Shocked gasps arose from some delegations, but others remained silent. The Chitauri delegates buzzed among themselves in what sounded like excited discussion rather than horror. 37 human colonists were systematically executed after discovering a trilithium deposit on territory legally granted to humanity by this council, Suman stated, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. Forensic evidence conclusively identifies Vorthak weapons and personnel as responsible for this atrocity. She showed the energy weapon signatures, the boot prints, the execution formation. Every piece of evidence was documented with scientific precision that left no room for doubt or interpretation. Admiral Thyros rose from his seat, his armored form towering over the chamber. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. The Vorthak military was conducting routine training exercises in the Kepler 442b system as approved by this council. If human colonists were killed, it was due to their failure to properly evacuate a designated military zone. The colonists received no evacuation order, Suman replied immediately. Furthermore, the evidence clearly shows they were executed after the military action had concluded, not killed during combat operations. Human evidence standards may differ from galactic norms, Thyros said with dismissive coldness. Perhaps your species is not yet advanced enough to accurately interpret alien military actions. Murmurs of agreement arose from several delegations. The lumina flashed patterns that the translator rendered as bureaucratic approval. Even species that had seemed sympathetic to humanity during the initial membership proceedings now appeared to side with the established power structure. Suman felt her carefully maintained diplomatic composure beginning to crack. She had spent years training for moments like this, learning to navigate the complex political relationships that kept galactic civilization functioning. But all her training assumed that other species valued justice and truth. The evidence is overwhelming, she said, fighting to keep her voice level. We demand justice for the murdered colonists and full reparations for their families. The council speaker made a gesture that might have been a shrug. The Vorthak explanation seems reasonable. Human colonists should have maintained better communications, with military operations in their system. And the trilithium deposit that the colonists discovered 3 days before their deaths? Suman pressed. The deposit that Vorthak forces are now mining exclusively? Admiral Thyros's eyes glowed brighter, and when he smiled, his razor-sharp teeth gleamed like weapons. Any resources discovered during military training operations naturally belong to the discovering force. This is standard galactic law. But the colonists discovered the deposit first. According to human records, which, as I mentioned, may not meet galactic standards for accuracy, the chamber filled with sounds that the universal translator rendered as agreement and approval. Suman realized with growing horror that this had never been a trial or an investigation. It was a performance, a demonstration to show humanity exactly where they stood in the galactic hierarchy. The council speaker raised his appendage for silence. The complaint is noted but dismissed. The Kepler 442b incident will be classified as an unfortunate training accident. However, given the apparent communication difficulties that led to this tragedy, the Council feels that human colonial operations require additional oversight. What kind of oversight? Suman asked, though she dreaded the answer. The Vorthak Empire will provide security services for all human colonies at a reasonable fee. This will ensure proper coordination between human civilian operations and galactic military activities. Admiral Thyros's smile grew wider. The protection fee will be 5 million galactic credits per colony per year, payable in advance. Suman stared at the assembled delegates, seeing her species' future laid out with brutal clarity. Humanity would be allowed to exist, to scrape together whatever resources the major powers didn't want, and to pay tribute for the privilege. Any attempt to find something valuable would result in another training accident. And if we refuse this protection, then regrettably, we cannot guarantee the safety of human colonies in sectors where military training exercises are necessary, Thyros replied smoothly. The session ended with humanity's formal submission to what amounted to a galactic protection racket. As the delegates dispersed, Suman gathered her evidence files with hands that trembled slightly from suppressed rage. She had expected aliens to be different from humans, but she had assumed they would be better, not worse. The corruption and casual cruelty on display made Earth's worst politicians look like innocent children. Her secure communication device chimed with an incoming message from Earth. Colonel Hyejin Kang's face appeared on the small screen, her expression unreadable. "Ambassador, I watched the entire proceeding through your recording equipment. Do we have authorization?" Suman looked around the emptying chamber, at the species that had just condemned humanity to vassalage or extinction. She thought of the 37 colonists lined up and shot for the crime of finding something valuable on their own legally granted territory. "Yes, Colonel. You have full authorization for Operation Honey Badger." "Understood. My teams are already in position." The transmission ended, and Suman was alone in the vast chamber with its symbols of galactic unity and cooperation. She had spent her career believing in diplomacy, in the power of negotiation and compromise to solve conflicts peacefully. The Galactic Council had just taught her that some problems could only be solved through force. As she walked toward the docking bay where her ship waited, Suman reflected on Admiral Thyros's parting words about humans not being advanced enough to understand alien military actions. He was about to discover just how advanced human military thinking could be when diplomacy failed. In classified facilities throughout human space, soldiers were receiving activation orders for missions they had trained for in absolute secrecy. None of the alien species represented in the Galactic Council had any idea what was coming, because none of them had ever faced an enemy that fought the way humans did. The Vorthak had defeated every species they encountered through superior firepower and traditional military doctrine. They had never faced an enemy that considered conventional warfare just one option among many, or soldiers trained to win at any cost using weapons designed not just to kill, but to terrify. Operation Honey Badger was about to teach the galaxy a lesson about the difference between civilization and survival. And humanity had just learned which one mattered when the chips were down. Staff Sergeant Jinwoo Lee floated in the absolute darkness of space, his specialized stealth suit rendering him invisible to every scanning technology the Vorthak possessed. Through his helmet display, he watched the alien patrol ships moving, in perfect formation around the former Kepler 442b system, now heavily fortified and redesignated as Military Zone Theta 7. The Vorthak had turned the human colony site into a major mining operation, with massive extraction platforms pulling trilithium from the planet's core. Defensive stations bristled with enough firepower to reduce a battle fleet to atomic particles, and patrol ships moved in predictable patterns that any military academy would have praised for their textbook precision. That predictability was about to become their weakness. Jinwoo activated his comm system, sending encrypted signals to the other 11 members of the Honey Badger squad scattered throughout the system. Each operator had spent months studying not just Vorthak military tactics, but their psychology, their cultural assumptions, and most importantly, their fears. Ghost Leader to all units. Operation parameters confirmed. Begin Phase 1. Lieutenant. Seokjin Bei was positioned near the main communication relay, his equipment already interfaced with the Vorthak network through backdoors that Corporal Yunhei Yu had planted weeks earlier. What he was about to do had never been attempted in galactic warfare, because no other species had ever thought to weaponize sound itself. Seokjin activated his psychological warfare package, injecting carefully crafted audio signals into the Vorthak communication channels. To human ears, they would sound like random static. To Vorthak auditory processing centers, they were the screams of their young being devoured by predators. The effect was immediate and devastating. On the lead patrol ship, Commander Vrex was reviewing mining reports when every speaker on his bridge began emitting sounds that triggered instincts buried in his species' genetic memory. His crew began howling in terror, abandoning their posts to huddle together in defensive postures that had kept their ancestors alive on their homeworld millions of years ago. What is happening? Vrex roared, trying to maintain command authority, even as his own instincts screamed at him to find shelter. Report! His communications officer was pressed against the wall, claws extended and eyes wide with primal fear. Sir, the sounds are coming from everywhere. The young are being hunted. But there were no young on the military ships, and no predators in the vacuum of space. The rational part of Rex's mind knew this, but evolution was stronger than logic. The Vorthak had conquered the galaxy through superior firepower, but their psychological foundation was still that of creatures who had once been prey. On another ship, Sergeant Mion Cho was implementing Phase 2 of the assault. Her specialty was bioadaptive warfare, turning alien biology against itself through precisely targeted stimuli. The device she had constructed would be impossible to detect through conventional scanning because it didn't exist in conventional physics. The quantum resonance generator created patterns of electromagnetic fluctuation that interacted directly with Chitauri neural structures. To most species, it would be completely harmless background radiation. To the insectoid minds of the Chitauri support crews, it was agony beyond description. The Chitauri aboard the mining platforms began convulsing, their compound eyes registering impossible colors that overloaded their visual processing centers. Some collapsed immediately, while others began attacking random objects in confused rage, their coordination completely broken. Captain Jemin O observed the chaos from his position near the main defensive platform. The Vorthak formation was already breaking apart as ships attempted to flee from threats that existed only in their evolutionary memory. Perfect military discipline was crumbling under assault from weapons that attacked the mind rather than the body. Ghost 4 to Ghost Leader. Defensive platforms are responding to the psychological attack. They're trying to jamming protocols. Copy that, Ghost 4. Initiate Phase 3. Private Wanho Park had been waiting for this moment. His specialty was close-quarters infiltration using technology that no alien species had ever imagined. While the enemy was focused on the invisible psychological attacks, Wanho slipped through their defenses using a method that defied every assumption about space combat. He was walking on the outside of their ships. The magnetic boots and micro-thrusters allowed him to move across hull surfaces as easily as walking down a hallway. The Vorthak had sensors that could detect ships approaching from light years away, but they had never designed systems to watch for individual soldiers walking on their own hulls. Wanho placed specialized charges at key structural points, devices, that would not simply explode, but would create resonance patterns designed to make the ship literally tear itself apart. When he activated them, the effects would look like catastrophic system failures rather than sabotage. Dr. Hyun-Woo Shin monitored the entire operation from a concealed observation post, analyzing alien reactions and adjusting the psychological warfare parameters in real time. What he was seeing confirmed every hypothesis about prey species psychology that he had developed during years of theoretical research. Ghost Leader. This is Ghost 7. Recommend escalation to full psychological protocol. Their evolutionary conditioning is even stronger than projected. Confirmed, Ghost 7. All units, implement terror doctrine. This was the moment that would become legendary in human military history. Sergeant Mion Cho activated her secondary systems, broadcasting human war footage directly into the Vorthak communication networks. Images of berserker Vikings, samurai charging certain death, human soldiers in World War II fighting to the last bullet filled every screen on every ship in the system. To the Vorthak, who surrendered when faced with superior odds as a matter of survival instinct, the images were incomprehensible horror. These humans fought harder when they were losing, became more dangerous when cornered, and seemed to welcome death in combat rather than fear it. But the worst was yet to come. Warrant. Officer Sun-Hee Lim had spent months studying Vorthak mythology and cultural fears. Every species had legends of things that terrified them, monsters from their collective unconscious that represented ultimate evil. She had identified the Vorthak's deepest nightmare and figured out how to make it real. The shadow projectors created false sensor readings that convinced Vorthak instruments they were being stalked by something that should not exist, something that matched perfectly with their species' oldest and most terrifying legends. The Devourer of Worlds, a mythical entity that had supposedly consumed entire star systems in their prehistoric past. On the command ship, Admiral Cruex stared at his sensor displays in growing horror. The readings showed something massive moving through their defensive perimeter, something that absorbed energy weapons instead of being destroyed by them, something that grew larger each time they fired at it. "Sir, recommend immediate withdrawal," his tactical officer whispered, his voice shaking. "The Devourer has returned." "That is impossible," Cruex roared, but his own voice carried uncertainty. "It is myth, legend, nothing more." "Then explain." "The sensor reading, sir. Explain why our most powerful weapons make it stronger." Around the system, Vorthak ships began withdrawing from their defensive positions, abandoning the mining operation in panic. Some fired randomly at shadows, while others simply fled toward the jump points as fast as their engines could carry them. The Honey Badger Squad watched from concealment as one of the most feared military forces in the galaxy dissolved into chaos without a single conventional shot being fired. They had not defeated the Vorthak through superior firepower or advanced technology. They had defeated them by understanding that beneath all their armor and weapons, they were still the descendants of prey animals. Staff Sergeant Jin-Woo Lee opened a channel to all units as the last Vorthak ship disappeared into hyperspace. "All units, primary objective achieved. The system is clear. Ghost 7 to Ghost Leader. Sir, they left everything behind. The mining equipment, the defensive platforms, even their personal gear. They ran so fast they didn't even try to salvage anything." Jinwoo smiled inside his helmet as he watched the abandoned alien installations floating powerlessly in space. The Honey Badger Squad had just demonstrated something that would change galactic warfare forever. Victory did not always go to the side with the biggest guns. Sometimes it went to the side that understood what their enemies were really afraid of. As human recovery ships began moving in to secure the abandoned facilities, reports were already spreading throughout the galaxy about impossible human weapons that could drive entire fleets insane with fear. The legend of the Honey Badger Squad was about to begin, and it would terrify alien military commanders far more than any conventional army ever could, because they had learned humanity's most dangerous secret. Humans were the one species in the galaxy that had evolved not as prey, but as predators. And predators understood things about fear that prey species could never comprehend. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos that had never been seen in the Chamber's 1,000-year history. Representatives from 12 different species spoke at once, their translators struggling to convert panic into coherent language. Admiral Thyros sat in his usual position, but his massive form seemed smaller somehow, his burning eyes dimmed by something the other delegates had never seen before: fear. The council speaker hammered his staff against the crystal floor, repeatedly, but the noise continued. Reports kept flooding in from across Vorthak space. Military installations abandoned, elite battle groups retreating from empty space, soldiers found catatonic, repeating human phrases they could not understand. "Order! Order in the chamber!" the ancient being finally shouted, his voice amplified to override the cacophony. "Admiral Thyros will present his report on the Kepler 442b situation." Thyros rose slowly, his ceremonial armor making grinding sounds that spoke of poorly maintained joints. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its usual authority. "The human forces employed weapons we have no defense against," he began, each word seeming to cost him effort. "They attacked our minds, our very nature as living beings. Our sensors could not detect them. Our shields could not stop them. Our weapons could not harm them. Murmurs of disbelief arose from several delegations. The Chithari's buzzing took on nervous overtones, while the Lumina flashed patterns of confused inquiry. "What exactly did these humans do?" asked Speaker Zolth of the Rigelian Collective, his crystalline form catching the light in anxious patterns. "They made us remember what we used to be before we became civilized," Thyros replied, and his voice carried a haunted quality that made every delegate in the chamber uncomfortable. "They reminded us that we are all descendants of prey animals, and they showed us what it means to face true predators." Captain Jamin O watched the proceedings from the concealed observation post that the Honey Badger Squad had established on the council station itself. Getting there had been trivially easy once they understood that alien security systems were designed to detect technology, not individuals moving with primitive stealth techniques. The squad had been inserted during routine diplomatic traffic, their equipment disguised as medical supplies and cultural artifacts. While the Galactic Council debated humanity's impossible weapons, 12 human soldiers were literally sitting in their walls, monitoring every communication and recording every word. "Ghost Leader, this is Ghost 4. I'm getting some interesting data from their internal communications," whispered Corporal Yunhei Yu through the team's encrypted channel. "Multiple species are reporting similar psychological breakdowns among their military forces. Word is spreading faster than their damage control can handle." Jamin smiled as he watched Admiral Thyros trying to explain to the Council how an entire battle fleet had been routed by enemies they never saw. The psychological warfare doctrine that Dr. Hyunwoo Shin had developed was working even better than projected. Ghost 7 to Ghost Leader. Recommend we implement Phase 4 of the Terror campaign. Their defensive mindset is exactly where we want it. Confirmed, Ghost 7. Begin broadcasting the historical files. What happened next would be remembered as the moment when galactic civilization first truly understood what humanity was capable of. Dr. Shin activated transmission protocols that sent carefully selected human historical footage to every major news network in Council space. The broadcasts began with seemingly innocent human documentaries about Earth's history, but the selection was deliberate and devastating. They showed human conflicts throughout history, focusing on moments when humans had faced impossible odds and chosen to fight anyway. The Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held a mountain pass against a million-strong Persian army. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, where civilians with improvised weapons fought elite military units rather than submit to extermination. Stalingrad, where human soldiers fought for every building, every room, every staircase for months rather than surrender. To alien species that had evolved surrender instincts as survival mechanisms, the footage was impossible to comprehend. These humans became more dangerous when they were losing, more determined when facing certain death, more effective when outnumbered. The psychological impact spread through Council space like a plague. On Chithari homeworld, the Hive Queens called emergency meetings to discuss the human problem. Their entire military doctrine was based on overwhelming numerical superiority, but the historical footage suggested that humans actually fought better when outnumbered. The Lumina energy beings, who had dominated through technological supremacy, found their strategic computers unable to model human behavior. Their wargaming programs crashed when asked to predict the actions of a species that apparently preferred death to defeat. Even the Rigelian Collective, known for their cold logic and mathematical precision, were struggling to understand how any rational species could develop such apparently self-destructive military tendencies. But it was the Vorthak who suffered the worst psychological impact. Their entire empire had been built on the principle that superior firepower guaranteed victory, that all rational beings would surrender when faced with overwhelming force. The human footage suggested that their basic assumptions about warfare were completely wrong. Admiral Thyros found himself in the unprecedented position of having to explain to his own high command why their forces were refusing to engage human targets. Elite battle groups that had conquered entire star systems were now requesting transfers rather than face the possibility of encountering human forces. The soldiers claimed that humans cannot be killed, Thyros reported to the Vorthak War Council in a transmission that the Honey Badger squad intercepted and recorded. They say that destroying human bodies only makes them angry and that their spirits continue fighting even after death. The War Council's response was swift and desperate. Find a way to defeat them, or the Empire will face internal collapse as our military loses confidence in our ability to protect them. Captain Jemin listened to the intercepted transmission with professional satisfaction. The terror campaign was working perfectly, but now it was time for the final phase. The demonstration that would establish humanity as the dominant military force in the galaxy. All units prepare for Operation Ghost Dance. Target is the Vorthak home system. Ghost Leader, are you certain? That's their most heavily defended space. Thousands of ships, orbital fortresses, planetary defense grids. Exactly, Ghost 4. When we take their homeworld without firing a shot, every species in the galaxy will understand that resistance is futile. The Honey Badger squad began moving toward their extraction point, their mission on the Council station complete. They had gathered intelligence on every major species' military capabilities, psychological profiles of key leaders, and detailed plans of defensive installations throughout Council space. But more importantly, they had planted the seeds of terror that were already growing into forest of fear throughout galactic civilization. The aliens now knew that humans possessed weapons that could break the will of any enemy, turn their own instincts against them, and make victory impossible even with overwhelming technological superiority. As their stealth ship departed from the Council station, Dr. Shin compiled his final report on alien psychological responses to human warfare doctrine. The terror campaign has exceeded all projections, he reported to Earth Command. Enemy military effectiveness is degraded by an average of 70% before engagement even begins. Most units are requesting reassignment rather than risk encountering human forces. What about civilian populations, Doctor? Asked Colonel Kang from her command center on Earth. Mass hysteria spreading through all major population centers. They're calling humans the nightmare species and the ones who do not yield. Some religious groups have declared us to be supernatural entities, sent to test their faith. Excellent. Phase 6 is authorized. Show them what humans do when we're done playing games. The transmission ended, and the Honey Badger squad set course for the Vorthak homeworld. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued its emergency session, desperately trying to find some way to negotiate with a species that seemed to view warfare as entertainment rather than necessity. They were about to learn that humanity had been holding back, using only psychological warfare and stealth tactics to avoid unnecessary casualties. The demonstration at the Vorthak homeworld would show them what human military doctrine looked like when the gloves came off. Admiral Thyros would get his wish to see humanity's true capabilities. He would just regret asking for it. The Vorthak homeworld of Draktar had never fallen to enemy action in over 2,000 years of recorded history. Surrounded by overlapping defensive grids that could vaporize entire fleets, protected by the most advanced military technology. In the galaxy, it was considered the most secure location in Council space. Admiral Thyros stood in the planetary command center, watching his sensor displays with growing confusion. For 3 days, reports had flooded in about human forces approaching the system, but his scanners showed nothing. No ships, no energy signatures, no indication that any hostile force was within 50 light-years of his homeworld. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the outer defense platforms," reported his communications officer, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. "They claim to be under attack, but we're not detecting any enemy vessels in their vicinity. Show me the transmission." The main view screen flickered to life, showing Commander Vex aboard Defense Station Alpha. The massive Vorthak warrior was pressed against a bulkhead, his weapons drawn but shaking in his claws. Behind him, his crew cowered in defensive positions, their eyes wide with primal terror. "Admiral, the humans are everywhere!" Vex screamed, his voice breaking with panic. "They're in the walls, in the air ducts, walking on our hulls. Our sensors show nothing, but we can hear them moving around us. Commander, maintain discipline. What are your tactical readings?" "No readings, sir. Nothing on any scanner. But they're here. They're all around us. My crew is reporting human voices coming through the ventilation systems, singing human war. Songs!" The transmission cut to static, leaving Thyros staring at a blank screen. Within minutes, similar reports came from every defensive installation in the system. Crews abandoning their posts, commanders requesting immediate evacuation, entire battle stations going silent without any indication of conventional attack. Colonel Heejin Kang watched the chaos unfold from the bridge of the stealth carrier, Persistent, hidden in the shadow of Draktar's largest moon. Around her, holographic displays showed the real-time status of all 12 Honey Badger teams as they systematically dismantled the galaxy's most formidable defense network, using nothing but fear and confusion. "Ma'am, Ghost Teams 4 through 7 report successful infiltration of the planetary shield generators," reported her tactical officer. "No resistance encountered. Enemy personnel have evacuated their posts." "Excellent. Signal all teams to proceed with Phase 2. What the Vorthak were experiencing was the culmination of everything humanity had learned about alien psychology during months of careful study. The Honey Badger teams were not simply infiltrating their installations. They were turning the aliens' own defensive instincts against them through precisely orchestrated terror campaigns. Staff Sergeant Jinwoo Lee crept through the corridors of Defense Station Gamma, his movements completely silent in the artificially generated gravity. Behind him, he left a trail of psychological warfare devices that would convince the Vorthak crew that they were being hunted by something that should not exist. The devices projected false audio signatures that mimicked the feeding sounds of Draktar's apex predators, creatures that had driven the Vorthak's ancestors into underground burrows millions of years ago. To the station's crew, it sounded like the Great Hunters had somehow followed them into space and were stalking through their own ship. Lieutenant Seokjin Bey had taken a different approach with Defense Station Beta. His specialty was cultural warfare, using alien beliefs and superstitions as weapons. The Vorthak had legends about warriors who refused to die, spirits of the dishonored dead who returned to claim vengeance against those who had wronged them. Seokjin's equipment created holographic projections of Vorthak soldiers bearing the markings of units that had been destroyed in previous campaigns. To the living Vorthak crew, it appeared that their own dead comrades had returned to punish them for abandoning their fallen brothers. The psychological impact was devastating and immediate. Entire sections of the defense grid went offline as crews fled their posts, convinced that they were facing supernatural forces that could not be fought with conventional weapons. On the surface of Draktar, General Boram Ko led a different kind of assault. Her target was not military installations, but the civilian population centers where the Vorthak leadership lived and worked. Her mission was to demonstrate that humanity could reach anyone, anywhere, whenever they chose. The infiltration teams moved through the capital city like ghosts, appearing long enough to leave evidence of their presence before vanishing into shadows that seemed deeper than they should be. Government officials woke to find human symbols carved into their bedroom walls. Military commanders discovered their personal communications had been replaced with recordings of human battle cries. Most terrifying of all, the humans left gifts, flowers from Earth, photographs of human families, children's drawings with messages of peace. The psychological message was clear. If humans could leave gifts, they could have left weapons just as easily. Dr. Hyunwoo Shin, monitored the global psychological impact from his mobile command post, watching as panic spread through Vorthak society, faster than any plague. Emergency broadcasts filled the airways as government officials tried to maintain order while dealing with reports of impossible human infiltrations. Population centers showing mass hysteria symptoms, he reported to Colonel Kang. Civilian evacuation of major cities has begun spontaneously. Government authority is collapsing as officials abandon their posts to seek shelter in underground bunkers. And the military response? Complete breakdown of command structure. Unit commanders are refusing orders to engage non-existent human forces. Several battle groups have jumped to hyperspace without authorization, claiming they will not sacrifice their crews to fight ghosts. The climax came when Admiral Thyros himself abandoned the planetary command center, broadcasting a general evacuation order to all Vorthak forces in the system. The transmission, intercepted and recorded by human intelligence, would become one of the most famous documents in galactic military history. All units. Immediate withdrawal from Draktar system. We cannot fight an enemy that exists everywhere and nowhere. The humans have weapons we cannot understand, tactics we cannot counter. Retreat to secondary defensive positions and await further orders. As the last Vorthak ships disappeared into hyperspace, abandoning their homeworld without firing a single shot, the Honey Badger teams emerged from hiding to begin the final phase of their mission. Captain Jamin O stood in the abandoned planetary command center, looking out at the sprawling Vorthak capital city through reinforced windows that had been designed to withstand orbital bombardment. The streets below were empty. The population fled to underground shelters or evacuation ships. His communication device activated, showing Ambassador Sumin Yoon's face on the small screen. She was aboard the diplomatic vessel that had been waiting, at the system's edge for this moment. Captain, the Galactic Council is requesting immediate negotiations. Admiral Thyros is asking for terms of surrender. Tell them we'll meet on the council station, Jamin replied. And Ambassador? Make sure they understand that this demonstration used only a fraction of our capabilities. The emergency council session that followed would reshape galactic civilization forever. Ambassador Yoon entered the chamber flanked by members of the Honey Badger squad, their black combat uniforms and human weapons causing visible panic among the alien delegates. Admiral Thyros sat in his delegation area, his massive form somehow diminished by defeat. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its former authority. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that render conventional warfare obsolete, he admitted to the assembled representatives. They defeated our most secure installations without losing a single soldier, without even being detected by our sensors. The council speaker gestured for silence as murmurs of fear and confusion filled the chamber. Ambassador Yoon, what are humanity's terms? Sumin stepped forward, her diplomatic composure masking the satisfaction she felt at seeing the same delegates who had dismissed the Kepler 442b massacre now cowering before human military might. Justice for the murdered colonists, full reparations to their families, recognition of human territorial sovereignty, and a new treaty establishing humanity as the Council's military enforcement arm. Enforcement arm? The speaker asked. The galaxy clearly needs a species capable of dealing with impossible military situations, Sumin replied smoothly. Humanity is prepared to provide security services to any council member facing threats that conventional forces cannot handle. The irony was perfect. The same species that had been dismissed as primitive and weak 6 months ago was now being offered the role of galactic police force by civilizations too terrified to refuse. Admiral Thyros raised his massive head to look directly at Colonel Kang, who had remained silent throughout the proceedings. "How did you defeat us?" he asked, his voice carrying genuine bewilderment. "We had superior numbers, superior technology, superior defensive positions. How did 12 soldiers accomplish what entire fleets could not?" Kang smiled, and there was no warmth in the expression. "You made the same mistake every species in this galaxy has made, Admiral. You assumed that warfare is about technology and firepower.